In this video, we're going to give you a quick introduction to the newest version of the SPARROW, the HK version, which stands for Hunter Killer. Hunter Killer has been upgraded to support the weapons DLC. That includes the installation of twin light autocannons and twin rocket pods. So let's get started. Walk into the pilot seat. In order to turn on the power is located up here in the orange section for engine and electrical controls. Turn on electrical power, and we can turn on the engine. The engine currently now is running about 8 RPS. It's in ground mode. In order to cycle up through the various modes, you would press the button 1 while sitting in the pilot seat. We'll go to flight mode and then overdrive, which ups the RPS. Put it back down to ground. Ground mode is used for essentially just charging the batteries while on the ground. In order to get the rotors going, there is a button to engage the rotors. So right now the rotors have started. It's in ground mode, so they're fairly slow. So we're going to ramp it up by pressing 1. That will get us into flight mode. We're now in flight mode. It's reflected both as an F in the engine control panel and also down on this small monitor here at the bottom. In order to take off, there are 2 control sets. There is a keyboard control set and a mouse control set. We're going to start with the keyboard control set. Keyboard control set, collective is up, down. Pitch forward is W. Pitch back is S. Roll is A and D. Left and right is yaw. So what I'll do is I'm going to bring it out. It starts off in auto stabilization mode, which is basically hover on the gyro. And you can see that reflected down here. So you have controls gyro stabilization active. The other indicator is for mouse piloting. So we're now in flight mode. Flight mode is used for kind of loitering. It will slowly decrease altitude. It's more designed for kind of sitting in a spot, just kind of going up, down, and also controlling the weapons. Typically, you're going to be using overdrive mode. Overdrive mode gives a little bit more RPS to the rotors and does a little bit faster maneuvering. So the next controls is the mouse control. Mouse control is you hit button 5 and you'll be enabling mouse control. You'll see now that mouse piloting is active and stabilization is active. And mouse mode, you'll see that the collective has now moved from up, down to the W and S keys, which were previously pitch. A and D is still roll. Pitch is mouse up. Pitch down is mouse down. Yaw is left to right. When you're in stabilization mode using mouse mode, it doesn't move as much forward and back. You typically are going to be using mouse mode when the stabilization mode is off. That's typically where the kind of SPARROW shines, is when it's in free flight mode. That's when your stabilization is off and you can have unlimited roll and pitch, etc. So I'm going to put it out of, we are now out of mouse mode, still in stabilization mode. And before we kind of get into doing some maneuvers, we'll go over some of the other controls that are located within the cockpit. So this is for enabling the weapons. You have a twin set of autocannons. They're slaved together, so when you pull the trigger, they will burst. They will be burst fire, 1 from each side. It's a total of 200 rounds, so you'll have 200 bursts. There is also the rockets. So I'm going to first enable the autocannons. What now happens is that the HUD will change to a reticle. This is a holographic predictable reticle. What it means by that is no matter where you look, if you were to look to left and right, what happens is that the reticle will basically move to reflect kind of your viewpoint. The weapons aren't changing. The direction of the helicopter is not changing. It just reflects what the target is that the weapons are pointed at relative to your mouse view. The way it does that is that there are a pair of infrared laser sensors located in the weapon pods, and there is a laser sensor here in the front. So that will point out and basically light up the point that's directly in front of the weapons pod, straight ahead in front of the weapons pod. The weapon pods are actually capable of being rotated. If you want to rotate them up, you press the 3 key. If you want to rotate them down, you can press and hold the 4 key. And what you'll notice is that the reticle is going down, and what it does is that this reflects where the impact point will be for the autocannon. So I'm just going to fire off a round. And we see there, so if I rotate up, it reflects. Now, as a test for the mouse look, I'm not going to change anything other than I'm going to look to the left. It's still hitting that same spot. The weapons aren't changing, it's just basically where my head is changing. And this is useful basically when you start to do mouse piloting. It will allow you to estimate where you're going to be, where you're firing, because typically you're going to be not looking straight ahead. You're going to be looking all over the place, and what happens is that will move the reticle to reflect where the weapons are actually pointing. I'm going to enable the rockets. The rockets you have to account for. The reticle is more useful for the autocannon. With the rockets, typically they do have a more limited range. They do arc it a little bit, but at shorter range they're pretty good. The reticle's pretty good actually for determining where they'll hit. But that reticle is typically designed more for using the autocannons. Once the reticle, if you happen to get into a position like you're pointing directly at the sky, the reticle will switch to yellow, and this is an estimate basically on where the weapon pods are being aimed. If you're aiming at some sort of zone where it makes contact with the ground, then it will reflect basically where it thinks the impact point is. So I'm going to turn off the weapons. The other controls we have in here is that there is a radar. In order to turn the radar, flip this switch here. You can switch the range. The ranges goes down to 50 meters. The way you can switch the ranges, you can either use the arrow keys here, or you can use the plus/minus keys. Right now it's picking up targets, so it will beep. If you want to turn off the beep, you can click on this button here, which silences the alarms. It will silence the alerts from the engine, and as well as it will silence anything coming from the radar. So we're picking up 3 points, which are just kind of off here near the harbor. As you zoom out, it doesn't have to wait for the sweep to go around for it to update. If you do turn, those dots will not change until the sweep passes over them. So we can go all the way out to back to 50 meters, or we can go all the way out to 5 kilometers. The P button is for pause. So if you want to pause the scan, so it'll just keep it at the last contact points. So that's the radar. Turn the radar off. You have a radio control. Turn it on here. It is a multi-band, which means it can either work in single channel mode, which is that you're transmitting and receiving on the same channel, or multi-channel, two-way mode. What this does is that there's a separate channel for sending and a separate channel for receiving, so you can have simultaneous conversations on multiple channels. So for example, if I have send and receive on the same, and I press and click the hold button, we're both sending and receiving, so it's being picked up. Where the mic and the speakers are located, they're in the headsets that are located on the seats. The observer, if we were to switch over to the observer, if you press button 1, the only control he has basically is just for the radio. If you press button 1, it will take over priority over the microphone, and he'll be able to transmit over the pilot. So both the pilot and the observer can hear what's being said, but if the observer presses button 1, he will have priority over the microphone. So that's the radio, and we'll turn that off. The other controls you have, you get your heat control here. That'll automatically go to 20 degrees. This is your fuel and battery display. Fuel is currently at 83%, battery on 100. This shows the temperature. Other controls here on the top is that we have a emergency beacon locator. Turn that on. There is an emergency beacon. If you get into trouble, turn this beacon on here. You can hear it's beeping a light. The other things is there is an internal light. You can switch that between white, and you can switch it to red mode, basically for night mode. Then you have your landing lights and your nav light controls here. This is a single pistol, some pistol ammo. There's some other radio, night vision binoculars, standard binoculars, so most of the observers, and for flashlight. Okay, so that covers kind of some of the interior of the some of the internal things. So let's get to doing something more fun, which is typically just flying this thing. So right now I'm in keyboard mode with stabilization turned on. I'm in overdrive, and let's go. So I'm going to pitch forward to start to move forward. Push the collective, so I'm kind of both pushing forward and pulling forward. It's in stabilized mode, so it's not going to be as fast. It'll try to maintain altitude. So where we want things going to shine, let's turn off stabilization mode and start doing some maneuvers. So in order to fly the helicopter, it's about developing potentials. You know what I mean? So in order to move fast forward, you want to tilt forward. You also want to use kind of collective forward to kind of pull you forward. You want to go up, pitch up, full collective. The quickest ways to turn is actually use a combination of yaw and pitch, so and roll. So if I want to do a quick turn here, I'm just going to roll all the way over, pull it all the way around, and even out. So this is stabilization mode is turned off, and I'm using, typically I'm going to be pressing collective constantly because I'm going to be using collective to pull me forward as I'm kind of pitching forward, and also to kind of keep me an altitude. If I'm getting too high, I'll just take my finger off the collective. So typically you're going to get a speed between 50 and 60 meters per second. And you're going to be using kind of yaw and roll to do some quick turns. Okay, so what I'm now going to do is I'm just going to put in the stabilization. From a fuel usage perspective, you get about 100 kilometers in fuel. Right now we're running over, so we're running a little bit harder on fuel, but it should get about 80 to 100 kilometers. It's a large gas tank that's powering a medium diesel engine, so it should be pretty economical when it comes to refueling the fuel. So right now I'm going to switch us off of stabilization and put us into mouse control. Now with mouse control, collective is now W and S. Pitch is mouse up. Pitch down is mouse down. A is roll, and yaw is left to right. Now I typically find when you're traveling kind of further distances, there is no autopilot and there is no altitude hold. It's kind of a fairly simple, small helicopter design, kind of for quick and close interdiction. Is that you might want to use mouse mode because typically, I mean, W is a little bit harder to kind of get you exactly where you want to go when it comes to pitch, and you can kind of do that with the mouse. So pitch down, go a little faster. We're going about 64 meters per second. That potential. And what I find, the Sparrow is a fairly nimble helicopter. That's kind of the way I kind of designed it. It should be fairly stable. And it's pretty economical to run. That's kind of what the original Sparrow was done for a Mr. N Jersey challenge for a small helicopter. Unfortunately, it wasn't chosen. But kind of impressed with how she operates. It's not the fastest, but it wasn't kind of designed to do that. Just going to do a few more maneuvers. We'll just go around the corner, pop up over top of the mountain, come down, then we'll park in front of the hangar. So again, what I'm using here is I'm pitching down using the mouse by pointing down. I'm holding the collective, which is kind of pulling me forward and pulling me up. I'm rolling in order to get better turn. Typically I'll use roll a little bit more than I will actually use yaw for turning. Come in here in front of the hanger. Switch to stabilization mode. Turn off mouse. We'll come down here. All right. Yeah, I'm just going to turn on the weapons. Both rocket and autocannon. I'll start off with autocannon. Unfortunately, I have no targets around, so we'll just do some dummy targeting. I'm going to, right now it's in stabilization with mouse mode off. I'm going to turn mouse mode on and turn off stabilization. Tilted the pod up, and let's do a few more runs. Oh, I'm going to pull the trigger, and you can see where the rounds are falling relative to the reticle. So it's a good estimate for where the autocannon. Now you notice I'm moving my head. Pop the stabilizer on. All right. Turn the rockets on. Turn off stabilizer. Go for gyro mode. Again, the rockets don't have the same amount of ballistic power as the autocannons, so won't have the same range, so you'll have to adjust for the reticle slightly, depending upon your angle, etc., in order to get the rockets to kind of fall. The rockets, you notice, they will go red. What happens is it's detecting, and there's no count on the rockets. So with the rockets, once it's down to kind of the last pod, it's detecting it's loading. It will go red and then go green, and now, as you notice, the rockets are all out. It is no longer available. So let's just the autocannon, the way the count's done in the autocannon is that it will count how many rounds are located in the magazine attached to the autocannon, plus if it's loaded, it will add 1. Because what you'll find typically is that the number will be off from the magazine because if you're running a belt, it'll even more and more because it doesn't reflect those items that are located in the belt or located actually in the weapon. So there is no belt, there is no kind of connection other than there's 1 round loaded in the autocannons, and then those rounds that are detected. So we're down to a count of 0. Pop on that. Turn off the weapons. Again, 3 to rotate up, 4 to rotate it down. All right, let's bring her in for a landing in the hangar. We don't need an overdrive. Make sure we're in stabilized mode, and we're using the keyboard. And to shut everything down, We'll switch it down to ground mode. We can turn off the engines, disengage the rotor. This next one here is called a rotor brake. So as you press the rotor brake, it stops the rotors, both in the rear and the front. Turn off the power, and it's done. Well, introduction to the new SPARROW HK. Thanks for watching, and have a good day.